Welcome, dear seekers, to Zodiac Talks Tarot, the corner of the universe where reason meets intuition, where the human psyche and the heavens have coffee together, and where laughter is just as sacred as enlightenment. I'm your longtime researcher, equal parts astrologer, psychologist, and storyteller, and if you've found yourself here today, it's not a coincidence. It's the quiet choreography of the cosmos. The theme for today's reflection is a sacred emergence. And yes, Sagittarius, that means you're stepping out of the fog and into the sunlight, but not before the universe checks if you've packed your humility, your humor, and your sense of direction. Spoiler alert, it's okay if you haven't, you're a Sagittarius, you'll improvise along the way. Now, let's begin where all awakenings begin, at the threshold. Imagine it. Behind you is the clatter of old burdens, the echoes of choices that belonged to a smaller version of yourself. Ahead lies a bright, endless meadow where possibility hums like sunlight on open grass. Today isn't just a day, it's a homecoming. A cosmic emancipation. The rebirth of your truest, wildest self, the one that doesn't apologize for dreaming too big or laughing too loudly. You are awakening to a higher voice within you, one that has been patiently waiting under layers of noise and compromise. The voice says, quietly but firmly, it's time. You may have noticed that phrase hovering around you lately, disguised in coincidences, restlessness, or sudden surges of inspiration that make no rational sense. That's your soul stirring, Sagittarius. And if it feels like the timing is suspiciously perfect, it's because it is. You've been guided here by forces far older than your to-do list. Over the decades I've studied people and planets alike, I've seen that transformation rarely arrives when we demand it. It tends to sneak in the back door, disguised as boredom, frustration, or a weird spiritual itch that no amount of productivity can scratch. That's where you are right now. Some invisible thread has been tugging at your spirit, holding you in place, fear of failure, maybe, or the exhaustion of trying to live up to expectations that were never truly yours. You've been looking around and realizing that what once felt safe now feels suffocating. But here's the good news, the fog is lifting. Slowly, deliberately, the outlines of your path are becoming visible again. Relationships that were confusing now reveal their real purpose. Priorities you used to chase are rearranging themselves. What once looked like chaos is starting to resemble design. You are not merely regaining momentum, you are reclaiming your sovereignty. This isn't just another pick yourself up moment, it's the reclamation of authorship over your own story. You're stepping into the role of the narrator, not just the character being tossed around by fate. You see, the world often teaches us that progress comes from effort, from speed, from sheer will. But in the deeper psychological and spiritual work I've witnessed, true transformation is quieter. It happens when you stop fighting to be something and finally allow yourself to become. Here's a truth I've learned, not from books but from life and observation: letting go is harder than holding on, but it's also infinitely more powerful. We live in a culture that idolizes control, but the cosmos, my friend, has always preferred surrender. Just look at the stars. They burn, collapse, and are reborn in endless cycles. So too must we. You, Sagittarius, are now standing at the same cosmic edge, invited into that sacred act of release. Letting go is not a defeat, it's an initiation. When you release what no longer belongs, an old belief, a toxic attachment, even a self-image that once defined you, you make room for grace. And grace, as any mystic or therapist will tell you, is the most efficient force in the universe. It moves mountains without breaking a sweat. You are not losing, you are creating space for the unimaginable. If you feel uncertain, that's fine. Even the most seasoned explorers feel a shiver before crossing into new terrain. The difference is, you keep walking. Remember, Sagittarius isn't a sign that settles for small stories. You were born to chase horizons that make other people dizzy. You're the philosopher with hiking boots, the optimist who knows that a map is just a polite suggestion. So, if life feels like it's pushing you out of your comfort zone, congratulate it, it's only doing its job. And let's sprinkle in a little humor before we get too celestial. Yes, you're evolving, but please don't turn it into a full-time performance. You don't need to sell crystals on Etsy or start calling your morning coffee a manifestation elixir. The divine doesn't require props. Sometimes spiritual growth just looks like taking a nap instead of doom scrolling or saying no without writing a paragraph of explanation. Enlightenment, my friend, is often found in the ordinary, in that sweet, stubborn moment when you choose peace over drama. If you've been wondering whether the universe has forgotten your address, it hasn't. It was just waiting for you to clean the front porch, metaphorically speaking, so it could deliver what's next. And what's coming is no small thing: clarity, purpose, and a sense of joy that doesn't depend on circumstance. As we close today's reflection, I want you to remember this: the point of all this cosmic talk isn't to make you mystical, it's to make you more human. To remind you that your spirit and your psychology aren't enemies, they're dance partners. The heavens might nudge, but it's your choices, your laughter, your patience that turn destiny into story. So here's your invitation, Sagittarius: step forward. Leave behind the fog of self-doubt. Breathe in that wild air of possibility. The meadow awaits. The horizon is wide. And the universe, it seems, has been saving the best view for you. In the quiet hours when the world finally stops shouting at you, relationships reveal themselves not as cinematic fireworks but as a series of subtle calibrations: breath, glance, temperature, the way a conversation leans left or right, and it's there, Sagittarius, that shared vision is forged. I say this as someone who has spent years reading star charts and case notes, and who has learned that intimacy thrives not in the intensity of feeling but in the discipline of attention. If you're partnered, the invitation isn't to reinvent your love so much as to relearn its music. Notice what is said without words, the quickening that happens when your ideas collide, the small civilities that act like oil in the gears, and understand that walking side by side into unmapped country requires both of you to carry your own compass while trusting the other knows how to read the sky. Honor your partner's trajectory with the same generosity you reserve for your own. This means you resist the common reflex to win the disagreement, you stop speed-solving feelings like math problems, and you allow understanding to ripen on its own vine. When both parties are permitted their separate weather, the climate of the relationship stabilizes. Humor helps more than you think. Nothing disarms a budding stalemate like a laugh that is kind rather than clever, and if you can learn to tease the stubborn moment, do we want to be right or in love today? You may find the old patterns lose their funding. Practice the Buddhist art of right timing. Speak when hearts are open, pause when heat rises, and remember that a well-placed silence carries more truth than 10 beautifully constructed paragraphs. If you're single, your task isn't to audition for love but to curate your field. That restless pull toward freedom is not fickleness but hygiene, a soul-level impulse to clear the room of anything that smells like performance or compromise fatigue. Let the past return only as a teacher, not a tenant. Bless what formed you, retire what deformed you, and archive the rest with gratitude. You aren't closing the door on romance, you're changing the building code. No more balconies that collapse under the weight of expectation, no more stories that ask you to shrink to fit. The person headed your way is fluent in wide horizons and won't confuse your independence with disinterest. They'll love you in ways that feel like wind at your back, not a leash at your throat. In the meantime, allow desire to be spacious, flirt with ideas, flirt with cities, flirt with your own potential, because the right lover will be attracted to the oxygen of your life, not just the polish of your profile. Now, about the material world: money, work, Resources the mirror where inner structure becomes outer consequence. Prosperity is indeed circling, but it prefers clear landing strips to chaotic festivals, so treat your calendar like sacred architecture and your budget like narrative structure. Both should support the plot you actually want to live. Optimism is your superpower, but optimism without logistics is just confetti, so pair your hope with a spreadsheet and watch how quickly possibility takes on bone and muscle. Move at the tempo of discernment. There are days for aggressive expansion and days for still water. The wisdom is knowing which you're in. Before you launch the grand investment or accept the shiny opportunity, do the unglamorous audit. What is this costing my attention, my boundaries, my long game? And if the math doesn't pencil, let it pass. Not every door deserves your key. From a psychological angle, many people sabotage abundance through two habits: ignoring the low drum of intuition because it lacks footnotes, and scattering energy across 5 priorities, each starving for protein. The correction is simple even if it is not easy. Listen earlier, focus longer. Think of strategy as compassionate realism. Protect your mornings for deep work, stack your tasks by cognitive demand, and reserve a margin for the human mess that is guaranteed to intrude. From a Buddhist point of view, in the long history of human attempts to interpret destiny, few symbols have aged as gracefully as the tarot. The cards do not shout, they whisper. They are less about predicting tomorrow's weather and more about diagnosing the climate of your soul. And Sagittarius, your current spread speaks of profound metamorphosis, one of those cosmic renovations where the universe politely but firmly removes what you've outgrown. The first card, Death, has a way of startling beginners, but any seasoned reader knows it's the most merciful of endings. It doesn't foretell catastrophe, it announces liberation. What's dying isn't you, but your disguises, the outdated roles, the half-lived dreams, the polite agreements you made just to keep peace at the expense of truth. Death in tarot is the moment you stop negotiating with what no longer fits. It's the psychic equivalent of spring cleaning, except you're the attic and the ghosts are sentimental habits. And if that sounds dramatic, remember you are Sagittarius, the Zodiac's philosopher-performer. Drama is how you metabolize meaning. Then comes judgment, and with it, the second act of your transformation. This is resurrection, not nostalgia. It's the universe pressing unmute on your authentic voice. Old stories resurface, but not to haunt you. They're coming up for revision, for reconciliation, for that awkward but necessary conversation between who you were and who you're becoming. Somewhere, perhaps in your personal history, there's a misunderstanding, a lost connection, an unfinished line of dialogue waiting for closure. Judgment is that inner courtroom where you stop cross-examining yourself and start granting pardon. It's not about erasing mistakes, it's about upgrading their meaning. Every choice that once embarrassed you becomes, in hindsight, a strangely efficient teacher. And here's the cosmic humor: just when you think you've reached the finale, life hands you a rewrite. The third card, the King of Pentacles, grounds this whole metamorphosis in the material realm. This is no airy promise of enlightenment detached from the rent check. The King represents mastery, the moment your spiritual integrity begins paying interest in tangible form. Abundance is arriving, but not as a lottery win, it's the earned harvest of inner alignment. When the psyche stops leaking energy into guilt or pretense, prosperity flows naturally, almost suspiciously easily. The key phrase is spiritual integrity. The King of Pentacles is not just rich, he's reliable. His success has roots. If death clears the soil and judgment plants the seed, the King ensures it grows into something that can feed you and maybe even your community. Together, these cards read like a trilogy: the release, the revelation, the reward. And yes, the year of triumph 2025 seems eager to mark this chapter as your official debut. But great transformation demands great housekeeping. The inner work now becomes essential. You're being asked to speak the secret language of the soul through symbols, synchronicities, and the small coincidences that most people dismiss as weird. Numbers 3 and 7 will follow you like breadcrumbs. The number 3, the archetype of creation, suggests expansion and synthesis. It's where idea meets expression. 7, the philosopher's number, hums with wisdom, mystery, and the sacred rhythm of reflection. When you see them on clocks or receipts, don't roll your eyes, take a mental note. The cosmos is fluent in subtlety. It won't send you a memo, it'll wink. Purple is your current ally in vibration. It's not fashion advice, it's frequency advice. Purple has always been the color of sovereignty and spiritual insight, the bridge between red's vitality and blue's calm. Wear it, hold it, even imagine it in meditation. You'll find that it tunes your energy like a perfect note in a long-forgotten instrument. Now, let's talk body, because spirit and flesh have an old and complicated marriage. Decades of Buddhist practice and psychotherapeutic observation have taught me that emotions are not vapor, they're tenants, and the hips are their favorite apartment. When you feel anxious, constrained, or restless, pay attention to that region. Tension there often signals unprocessed emotion, frustration about mobility, metaphorical or literal. Yoga won't fix your existential questions, but it will make you flexible enough to face them without cracking. Let movement be your prayer, let release be your meditation. As for your vocation, the stars suggest that you are sitting on the verge of a creative or professional breakthrough that feels uncannily personal, as though it was written specifically for you. Don't mistake this calling for ambition. Ambition asks, how far can I go? A calling asks, how true can I be? This project, whatever form it takes, will require equal parts courage and discretion. You don't need to shout your vision from the rooftops. Sometimes wisdom whispers. Share your plans with those who have both power and goodwill. Avoid the casual colleague whose ego gets indigestion at other people's success. Jealousy is rarely announced, it just smiles and forgets to forward your email. Protect your ideas the way a gardener protects seedlings. Exposure too soon invites pests. Remember that scarcity is a contagious myth. When you dim your light to keep others comfortable, you do both sides a disservice. You are not stealing the spotlight, you are expanding it. In the ecology of human progress, one person's radiance becomes another's invitation. This is what I mean when I call you a chosen one, not anointed by hierarchy, but awakened by purpose. Your creative fire was never meant to flicker politely. Nurture it. Study it. Let it mature until its heat becomes sustainable warmth rather than reckless blaze. From a psychological perspective, this phase is about integrating confidence with humility, action with patience. From a Buddhist lens, it's the dance between effort and letting go, right livelihood, right intention, right timing. If your plans don't unfold immediately, resist the Western urge to label that delay as failure. The universe is not Amazon Prime. Delivery schedules vary by karma. Keep refining, keep aligning, and trust that what's yours cannot miss you. There's humor in this too, because cosmic timing rarely caters to human convenience. You'll find that when you finally stop refreshing your metaphorical tracking number, the package appears. Transformation, as I've observed in clients and in myself, is always both majestic and mildly inconvenient. But when the dust settles, when the internal architecture clicks into place, you realize the chaos was choreography all along. So take these cards not as fortune-telling curiosities but as living metaphors. Death invites you to release, judgment invites you to awaken, and the King of Pentacles invites you to sustain. Together, they form a map of evolution written in archetypes. And as you step forward into the wide arc of 2025, the year of triumph, remember this: enlightenment is not a lightning strike, it's a gradual sunrise. Let it rise within you, slow, certain, and a little mischievous, just like the universe itself. There's a particular rhythm to Sagittarius energy, half philosopher, half explorer, like a jazz musician riffing on the melody of existence. It's brilliant, spontaneous, inspiring, and occasionally a little too eager to skip to the good part. The universe, however, has a sense of humor. It tends to hand you not a fast-forward button, but a pause sign, usually disguised as a delay, a technical difficulty, or a person who insists you slow down and actually listen. Consider this your cosmic reminder: even the brightest mind needs pacing. Sagittarius, your gifts are extraordinary. You think in panoramas, not snapshots. Your honesty is refreshing, your vision borderless. You were born with the ability to look at chaos and see meaning, to take the ordinary and stretch it into philosophy. But those same gifts, when overclocked, can turn your brilliance into burnout. The philosopher becomes the preacher, the honesty turns sharp, and the vision morphs into restlessness. I've seen this pattern play out in both the astrology charts I study and the therapy sessions I've observed. People with expansive energy often forget that not everyone is built to sprint at cosmic speed. Reality, bless its stubbornness, moves slower. So, here's your first spiritual warning, disguised as practical advice: when you feel that familiar itch to leap ahead, to send the text, start the project, end the conversation, buy the ticket, fix the world, pause. Ask yourself the question I've learned to ask before every major leap: does this align with my soul's deeper truth, or just my temporary excitement? The distinction matters. Excitement burns hot but short, alignment burns quietly but forever. Integrity, in this sense, isn't just about morality, it's about pacing your energy so that your truth can keep up with your enthusiasm. Tact, on the other hand, is what keeps your genius from sounding like judgment. Sagittarius honesty is often the emotional equivalent of espresso, potent, exhilarating, but occasionally too strong for the room. You don't have to dilute it, just learn to serve it with a little empathy. The right words at the right tempo can change everything. And yes, there's humor in this lesson too. Sometimes life makes you trip over your own enthusiasm just to remind you that humility still looks good on you. You might misfire an email, speak before listening, or make a joke that was supposed to be clever but lands like a philosophical brick. Laugh. Own it. Correct it. You're not meant to be flawless, you're meant to be awake. For the students, the seekers, and the dreamers, and let's be honest, every Sagittarius is all three at once, this is the season to bring structure to your curiosity. I know, structure sounds like a four-letter word to you, but think of it as scaffolding, not a prison. The stars whisper the same advice my most disciplined mentors have given: ground your foundations before you aim the arrow. Dreams built on scattered effort collapse under their own enthusiasm. Whether you're studying philosophy, designing a business, writing your novel, or just trying to understand the strange equation of your own emotions, treat your learning like a sacred practice. Create a rhythm. Honor your commitments. But also, leave a window open for the wind, because your greatest insights often sneak in unannounced. Even the archer, after all, must care for his bow. That line has haunted me for years because it's truer than most proverbs. In astrology, the bow symbolizes focus, the tool that channels wild energy into direction. Without maintenance, it loses tension, precision, or both. So, Sagittarius, when you find yourself drained, impatient, or uninspired, it isn't a sign to quit, it's a signal to rest. Step back. Breathe. Polish the tools that make you effective: your focus, your physical health, your sense of humor. Wisdom doesn't always come from doing more, often it's born from doing less, but with intention. Speaking of synergy, the stars are generous today. They offer you three allies whose energies resonate with yours like different instruments in the same cosmic band. With Aries, sparks fly, sometimes literally. You share a mutual appetite for adventure, debate, and doing things yesterday. Together, you can start revolutions, though one of you might need to remember where the fire extinguisher is. With Leo, the connection is royal and radiant. Both of you live for passion and grand vision. The trick is not turning it into a competition for who shines brighter. Let admiration replace ego, and you'll create something magnificent. And then there's Aquarius, your air sign co-conspirator in thought. Conversations with them feel like flying, intellectual, unconventional, sometimes delightfully bizarre. They won't try to ground you, they'll offer you another horizon. If any of these souls cross your path, pay attention. The universe may be staging a collaboration that could light up both your futures. Now, allow me to step out of analysis for a moment and speak personally. After decades studying astrology, psychology, and even the Buddhist philosophies that underpin detachment, one truth keeps reasserting itself: growth is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You revisit old themes, face recurring patterns, and sometimes, yes, repeat mistakes, but each cycle carries more light. You think you're regressing, but you're actually refining. The Sagittarius journey, in particular, is a dance between expansion and surrender, between action and reflection. You are the sign that must learn the paradox: freedom requires discipline, and surrender leads to motion. I learned this firsthand years ago during a time when my own plans imploded. I had the vision, grand, fiery, perfect on paper, and life said, "Not yet." It was infuriating. I paced like a caged philosopher, arguing with fate. Then, slowly, stillness took over. I began to see that the pause was not punishment but preparation. In the silence, clarity bloomed. The breakthrough came not when I fought the delay, but when I let it teach me timing. You might be in that space now. Don't mistake stillness for stagnation. It's incubation. This is, after all, the great paradox of Sagittarius wisdom: to chase horizons while learning that truth is not somewhere out there but quietly blooming within. You may fear that if you slow down, you'll lose your edge. The reality is the opposite: the sharpest arrows are the ones most deliberately drawn. So slow your breath, refine your aim, and let the target come to you. As we close, let me offer something I rarely do: a blessing, or if you prefer, a prayer. May you see beyond illusion. May you reclaim the luminous, unguarded self that existed before the world taught you to filter your fire. May your wings unfold not in defiance, but in trust. May your heart be a home for love that liberates, not confines. And may this year of triumph 2025 reveal the truth you were born to live, that you are one of the chosen ones, meant not just to succeed, but to illuminate. So, dear Sagittarius, walk forward lightly. You are not drifting, you are arriving, at a place your soul always remembered but your mind had forgotten. Savor this arrival. Let life surprise you again. Celebrate your own contradictions, laugh at your lessons, and keep aiming higher, not out of restlessness but reverence. The sky isn't your limit, it's your mirror. And before we part, a small earthly request: if today's reflection stirred something in you, if you felt seen, grounded, or even just mildly amused, share that energy. Click like, pass it along, and subscribe to Zodiac Talks Tarot. Here, we don't chase destiny, we learn to dance with it. The universe has many more stories to tell you, and I'll be right here, your guide among the stars, waiting for the next chapter we'll explore together.